Macmillan Audio presents The Hank Show, How a House-Painting, Drug-Running DEA Informant Built the Machine That Rules Our Lives, by Mckenzie Funk. Read for you by Eric Jason Martin, with an introduction from the author. Prologue. Analog. One morning in the spring of 1985, a white man in his mid-30s, stocky in build, boarded a flight from California to Atlanta with a passport taped to the bottom of his left foot. The passport, hidden inside a deck shoe, bore his real name. His paper ticket had an alias. He had paid for everything in cash, pulling bills from a thick wad in his pocket. He had recently shaved off his beard. It had been days since the man last slept, so once seated after he smoked a cigarette, he took his chance. He leaned back and closed his eyes, then began to snore so loudly that when he woke up on the other side of the country, his fellow passengers burst into applause. From the Atlanta airport, the man took a taxi to a used car lot, where he offered $750 for an old pickup truck. And when the dealer asked to see his driver's license in order to fill out some paperwork, he growled at him, "Do you want the fucking money or not?" Soon he was steering the truck north and east into the hills of North Carolina, to a rental house in the woods at the end of a dirt road. His family hadn't seen him for a long time, months, maybe a year, and his two girls had never seen him without a beard. The older one, Desiree, who was 6, watched the truck pull up and watched her mom greet the stranger with a kiss. "Who is it?" she whispered. He lived in the Bahamas, on an island called Great Harbor Key, but he'd been on a job in Central America, he later explained, when he'd had to go dark. 2 people he was working with had suddenly gone missing. Just poof, disappeared, he said in his baritone, and he feared he would be next. He fled, making his way to Mexico before sneaking across the border to San Diego, where he hid out and spent his days in Balboa Park, taking art lessons and teaching himself how to oil paint. Desiree would one day see holes in her dad's stories. The part about San Diego, though, about his picking up some technical skill more or less overnight, that rang true. He had that kind of mind. When he finally ventured out of the rental house, a day or 2 after arriving in South Carolina, he took her and her little sister, Carly, 3 years younger, to a hobby shop in a nearby town. He bought an easel, canvas, paint, and brushes, and they returned to the woods. Then he began painting their portraits, memorializing what he had while he still could. In hers, Desiree is depicted sitting on her father's lap in the cockpit of his airplane, shadow on one side of her face, light on the other, smiling up at him with a hint of a question in her eyes. After 2 weeks of hiding out at the house, he seemed to decide on something. The whole family piled into the pickup. A person doesn't raise suspicions when he's traveling with kids. They began driving south to Florida with a cardboard sign in the back window, "Lost plates." Police pulled them over in 3 states, and he talked his way out of trouble each time. They reached Fort Lauderdale after a dozen hours on the road. He dropped his family off at a friend's house and continued alone to a payphone, where he called a famous attorney he had grown close to in the Bahamas, F. Lee Bailey. He asked Bailey to contact the Drug Enforcement Administration. He wanted to cut a deal. He had access to something valuable, and he knew, even then, years before he built his first supercomputer, years before he became America's Dark Lord of Data, that it was worth more than gold or coke or pot. He had information.
Author's Interlude. What he had on me, and why I care. An introduction is in order. My name is Mckenzie Funk, and my Lex ID is 0008745298875.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?